I wanted to talk about big buck speed scouting and really looking at your land, whether it's public land, private land, and narrowing down those great spots that you can hunt immediately and effectively. And I think a lot of time is wasted scouting, and whether it's scouting public land, private land, dissecting your own land, your own property. And I'm going to give you just a kind of a fact of when we moved to the property here in Minnesota. We're very fortunate to own this land and have this land. And I lead a very busy life. We didn't close on the land until June 5th. Everyone leads a busy life. I travel a lot. I think I just looked, and since the middle of December, I've stayed in a Holiday Inn 124 nights. So that's a little example of my road schedule. Since that time, I figured it out that Dylan and I have shot and published about 160 videos during that time. I put on almost 50,000 miles in my truck. So during that time, we finished an 18 video web class and created that, fixed the site so it could hold that. So I'm always on the go. We're always trying to get things. And you know, oh, by the way, we have the new Minnesota farm. We ended up putting out 11 tree stands. We have 4 blinds, redneck blinds, and you can imagine the mock scrapes, cameras, all the work that we had to do this. All that being said, I'm sorry I can talk too long about a topic sometimes, but I've seen less than 10% of the entire property here that we own. And that may shock you, because I know if you own land or you want to own land, even public land, you're looking at it like, man, we need to get out in the woods, put boots on the ground and figure this all out. And I'm here to tell you, you don't need to. And this is I have a history of this going back to the late 80s, whether it was hunting public land or private land, looking at the land, where the deer move, and I'm scouting and I'm looking at areas specifically where I feel that I can actually kill a mature buck. And when you think about it, that's a very sacred location. You can't just happen to stumble upon that usually, because that should relate to preserving your land, preserving your hunt, making sure you're not blowing it out the first time. And what that means is you have to pay really good attention to how you access the land, how you get out, on and off the land, how you get in and out of your tree stand, deer blind without spooking deer that are in front of you. It's very critical that you move about your land as a predator. When we look at our land here, we have a lot of acres that are really cool. Dylan and I went in and sat in an area this morning for just a random morning hunt. We knew it would be safe getting in and out because it's in the middle of all the bedding areas. We're down in the hole, we call it. We actually literally call it the hole. And that was an area we could get in and out without spooking deer. But it was so cool. I'm sure, and Dylan was doing the same thing, but when we're walking through, you're just kind of looking around. You know, we've driven through there with the Kubota a few times, but it's a little bit different when you're going through at walking speed and just taking in every tree and every weed and brush pile and rock and crevice and crack that you see on the land. And I don't need to look at the entire land, and we will do that during the winter. I'm going to be cutting timber. Usually when I'm out there, I have a mission. I'm cutting timber, I'm looking for a certain bench, I want to create bedding areas in a certain area. What I'm doing is considering my access and considering where a mature buck might actually move to actually offer a shot during the hunting season. That means he's not going to move across the top of this food plot right here, right against the ag field consistently. I can't plan on it, I can't count on it. Maybe he'll be in this back corner. And so in this back corner here, we have a stand where we can come through here. We're in the middle of the morning right now, early afternoon. We could go right into that stand that's back in that corner. You can actually see a little hole there. We have a camera. We've been seeing Negan, the big buck back there, and HuntWise created an entrance exit for that, and we show where the wind should be. We want those winds blowing back out into this food plot right here. This food plot's long. I'd say it's 150 yards from front to back to get back into that back corner, maybe even 175. So when we're in that back corner, we're in a very remote area. Kind of imagine that 150-yard food plot jutting back. We don't expect to shoot them out here unless we're shooting with a muzzleloader back across here. But with a bow, we want to be right back there. And what that allows us to do is look into a window of their home and their movement that's very reclusive and very remote. It's literally 175 yards off the field edge. And so when we get in here after daybreak, a post-daybreak stand entrance, I talk about that's one of the 3 key times to enter a morning stand, either just in time, post daybreak, or a little early, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. But we're waiting for the deer to clear the fields. We get in there, and now during the rut, we have the perfect rut cruising stand where we can look into a remote area and we can actually expect to kill that buck. We have lots of stands around these locations, and everything has to be considered. Would a mature buck go through this area regularly? And so what we did during the summertime is we placed trail cameras and mock scrapes in all those areas. Not where they're feeding out in the summertime, not where they're hitting some water hole, not where they're out in the open feeding where you can see them all the time. We put them where they're going to tell us, hey, I feel comfortable moving back here in the cover. This is in a random inside corner. It's in a funnel. It's in a convergence of woods, that inside hourglass area. It's on a bench, a saddle. They're in areas where we expect that fall movement for a very reclusive mature buck. He can move through that area. We can get a shot into that location. We're putting a mock scrape there to make sure that he can tell us, yeah, I like this area. And then when that mock scrape branch fills with dozens of deer preorbital gland scent, you'll see those trails converge of one over that mock scrape, a good mock scrape, and that's where we have those stands located. We flip around on this property and we get in over to the drop-off stand. We talked about that a while ago, where we can get into that stand, we can drop our wind off a steep bank, and we can expect not to spook any deer, and then in the morning that wind's going to blow out right over that giant hollow. We have a stand location down below. We call it the Apple Creek plot. Apple Creek, not plot, Apple Creek stand. We have an Apple Creek cell cam down there. We show pictures from that sometimes. Deer come through there, it's low. It's a long funnel of hollow of wind movement, so we can blow it off to that steep face, that same steep face we'd blow it to in the evening from above, and we can kill a mature buck there. It's very remote, full of apple trees, very thick, and that's a spot where we can count on the wind to blow it into a side hill where there's no deer, it's too steep, and again, that's that same side hill that we can blow it into from up above. That stand above us is about 80 to 100 yards off the field edge, so it's in a fairly remote area as far as getting back into the timber a little bit. The next one down, the anthill stand. The anthill stand represents the furthest point on that face, on that side of the field, in that woodline edge, that opening gets back into the woods. So imagine it's a pinch point. Deer either have to go around it out in the field, behind the stand location, or they just simply pinch right on the bench that's in front of the stand location, go side to side, and that's that furthest point into the woods. We could be further down on that edge in other locations, and we might be as far as where that deer line is moving that's parallel to the border, let's say 80 yards parallel to the border, away from that border. We could be in other stand locations on that wood line where we'd only be 20 yards off that edge. We wouldn't be able to see into that because we can't go that far in without spooking deer. So we're looking at those pinch points. We have the next one down is the power line stand. That again represents a steep face. We can actually hunt that with morning and evening movement, especially morning during the rut and evening early season right now. So I'm looking at on paper. I'm looking at constrictions out in swamps. UP of Michigan, I used to hunt out there a lot. And I'd specifically avoid areas that are big, huge, unbroken areas of hardwood timber where there's no definition of movement. The same with swamps. If you had a series of islands that went through a swamp that connected hardwoods to a big, went through a marsh, connected to a big dry swamp where a deer could actually get in there, then you're just putting those pieces together at home and saying, whether it's a big private land parcel, a small private land parcel, or public land, that I expect deer to move on this inside corner. I expect them to move at the bottom of this ridge system. I expect them to move on the change of habitat line where there's a clear cut, where there's old timber. And the more of those changes in land features and habitat features you can put together at one time, it creates a funnel of movement, and it creates a spot that you can speed scout from your living room and just go out and verify really quickly that that's a spot to hang a stand and a spot that you can hang a buck. How do you verify? Does it make sense? The old sign is almost more valuable than fresh sign, where you can see a history of buck sign and a history of buck use in a specific area. You can see that for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, these trees have been scarred. I know a jack pine out in the swamp up in the UP of Michigan that's about 5-6 inches in diameter. It's just carved out on one side because if deer or bucks move through that area, they're going to move through that funnel and they're going to leave their mark on that. You know what's interesting about a lot of these locations? You know, you're verifying with old sign. You can even find old licking branches from the year before. That combination of historical sign is very powerful. And then if you have fresh sign to match it, boy, when you go in there, everything looks good on paper. You go to that spot, there's fresh sign, old sign, hang a stand, hunt it, enjoy it. You've already figured out your access going in and out. But what's interesting, a lot of these areas where you expect to kill a buck, you don't see a lot of does. There are areas that are behind the doe movement, to the side of the doe movement. The best buck sign, unless it's a staging area where bucks are staging before they go out to a food source and they're leaving a whole bunch of sign where does like to actually bed. The does have already cleared that area, bucks come through, staging area. That's why it's almost impossible to hunt staging areas. If you blow it, you blow out the whole movement. You spook those deer. But what's great about these locations, typically it's just bucks. We're getting a lot more bucks typically in our mock scrapes than we are does, even just traveling through that area. And now we get the does and fawns hitting the mock scrapes too, and that's a combination of all that scent that's being left, that pre-orbital gland scent. So think about that speed scouting. It doesn't have to be that hard. If you're spending a lot of boot time on the ground, unless you're going into specific locations, you're saying, I can kill a buck because of this, and you're just going and checking it out, then a lot of times just wandering around the woods for a long time is not an efficient way to spend your time. And that's why on our new property here, I've only spent, enough time to scour about 5 to 10% of the entire parcel, because I've been purely focused on scouting those specific areas where I know I can kill a buck or think I can kill a buck, and then putting cameras out, mock scrapes, knowing that he's going to move through that area, validating that. It's already been validated by the old sign, and that's where I've been spending my time. And you can imagine with 15 stands and blinds to put out, we have 8 acres green plots here, 3.5 acres of corn. We've had multiple fertilizer treatments. And oh, by the way, I'll be hunting with the hunting public in Pennsylvania in mid-October. We'll be practicing these strategies. Dylan will be along to film it. I might go back to Michigan this year to hunt public land. I love going back to Pennsylvania. Shot a real nice buck on Pennsylvania public land last year, and it's doing these same things. They're major movements. When I go back on Pennsylvania, I'm going an hour and 15-minute in, straight walk to a specific spot. And if I can validate that that's a good spot with sign to hunt, I sit down and hunt. I don't walk much further. Think about that this year, whether it relates to your own land or hunting on public land. You can get it done without a lot of scouting. Really pay attention. Always ask yourself, would a mature buck move through this area during the daylight, even with some hunting pressure, throw it in? Would he be in that location? And if you've done your homework and you spend a lot of time on your couch looking at this stuff, or your dining room table, scouring over maps, then you're going to find the answer is yes. When you go in there, you're going to find that sign, you're going to validate that location, and you're going to find a highly effective area without confusing yourself with a lot of acres and a lot of miles to walk of nothing in between those hot spots. Find those hot spots from your home, your living room, go out in the woods and validate, and you're going to have a great hunt this fall with a minimal amount of boot work. Now you might have a lot of work with stands and locations and access routes and figuring it all that way, which stands you can use with which winds. That's the strategy portion that I love. Try it this year, try it this season. I know you won't be disappointed. And I think in the end, not only will you be a more efficient hunter, use your time more efficiently, but you're going to be a more successful hunter, and that's what matters. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, you're obviously interested in whitetail habitat solutions, what I have to teach, and you will love my new web class series. The first one is how to design your whitetail property. It's out now. The link is in the description. I invite you to check it out. It's on my website. Can't wait to hear about it.